Thank you, Mick, and thank you everyone for the opportunity to discuss what advancements and improvements we've made at NYRA, working with Dr. Peterson and also with Christy, Dr. Mahaffey, I should say, on implementing the maintenance and the day-to-day, the practical side of what Mick has just discussed. And as he pointed out with the task force report that was formed by the governor in 2012, there were certain initiatives that were discussed. And one of those initiatives was NYRA had always compiled historical data on all of its track maintenance, but it was done on paper form and done very generically, where information would be kept as far as the track being harrowed, or it was a sunny day and 70 degrees, or the track was graded. So the level of detail that we're keeping now because of this database or because of this website that we're using, it's made my job so much easier to be able to look at 3 different operations at one point. For instance, last night I landed at 11:45, got delayed because of thunderstorms, and to be able to pull all 3 locations to know we didn't get any significant rain at Belmont, knowing I get a good night's sleep, not having to worry about turf today, it just makes all the difference in the world. I'm going to go into a discussion on how this has affected how we move forward with the equipment we're using, how it affects the management of the surfaces, and also our business model at NYRA, being able to put stuff out to the patrons or to our bettors with information, whether it's the turf information, what other racetracks have done as far as cutting the grass, irrigation, the measurements as Mick has discussed. This is all part of this continuing program for transparency and communication, and it doesn't only affect the bettors, it also affects our trainers and our horsemen. Training in the morning at NYRA, my phone's on 24 hours a day, and one of the things that we've tried to do is to have a communication with these trainers where when I get to some of these slides, you'll see how we open the racetrack differently depending on what the weather condition is, what the weather that we're expecting, and that's where between the weather station and this data has been so important with moving the ball forward. As Mick pointed out with the data collection, this was this year's, this was an interesting day because of the, it looks like an insignificant amount of rainfall, only 1/4 inch of rain over an extended period of time. And we had 12 hours of a dry period before what's been highlighted here. And one of the points with this data collection is now we can look back on the turf. How do we manage the turf? How do we manage our rail moves by looking at what kind of rainfall we've received, and also for our irrigation going forward, what we plan on irrigating. That's the turf side of it. Now looking at the data side of this, changed the dates to Aqueduct in December, and it's 22 degrees, and we've got 30-mile-an-hour winds and gusts up to 45. This not only affects the management of the surfaces, it also affects the communication with the jockeys. To be able to have data that's readily available, that's accurate data in 15-minute intervals, to be able to have that communication with the jockeys to go through and say the wind gusts that the Weather Channel or another news station are putting out at 50+ miles an hour, this is what's happening at Aqueduct. We can give them real-time data for the jocks, and that communication is invaluable with them. In order to have that trust with the jockeys, whether it's temperatures, whether it's rainfall, whether it's wind speed, these are all important things that help that decision-making on what's taking place for winter months, as well as last summer at Saratoga. Opening day, there was extraordinary heat wave that went through, going through the heat index, being able to have that information and pass it on to our regulatory veterinarians and make a decision on whether it's okay to race or whether it's not. Again, now you've got some data to go by. The data tells the story on everything we do at the racetrack. And until Mick got involved with this, I never realized how much we were missing by not being able to see this historical data and going back and pull from it and learning on what worked with the tracks, what didn't work with the tracks, what kind of cycles, or is there anything that's sticking out on how the track responds. An example of that is Aqueduct, where we go through our winter racing there, and now you're able to see in 15-minute intervals what the weather is. Now, is the salt content correct? We do our salt samples weekly, and you can see how the track is reacting. Now, when the temperatures drop to 31 degrees and the track starts balling up and we have to put extra tractors on, it also influences how many people we put to work that night. So not only is there a savings, but it helps us manage how we maintain the racetrack. The rainfall chart that I was talking about before, going into turf now, again, an insignificant amount of rain looking at this chart with only 1/4 inch of rain. But leading up to this, we had 1 3/4 the prior 2 days. This is a slow, steady rain through our racing period. It was a Friday afternoon post at 3 p.m. So, you wouldn't think that it would be much of a big deal with the courses. They were rated as good, and you had 1/4 inch of rainfall. That's the damage of 1/4 inch of rainfall after 2.5 inches of rain in that 36-hour period. So in order to manage the courses, now I can go back through with our operators and again, have that open communication with the racing office and the executives on whether we need to move the rail, which obviously we did, whether we take a race off, depending on the time of the year, how many more races are we going to be at that specific location? Again, it's just another tool that we now have to be able to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, because for a trainer or an operator, they look back at that 1/4 inch of rainfall and say, it's insignificant, the pavement's dry, why aren't we running all 6 races on the grass today? Well, here's the reason. And fortunately, we have that communication with the racing office to be able to say, this is the damage you're going to do. It's not unsafe, but this is the damage that we'll be stuck working with for the next time period and what we're going to come back to from Saratoga. Fortunately, we've made significant improvements at Belmont to expand the courses, both the Widener and the inner course. I'll go into that in a little more detail later, but this is just another way of how we manage using the weather and the data that's now available that before we never had. In addition to Mick's weather service that we use, or his website for the maintenance, I should say, we use 2 outside weather services. That also has helped influence how we not only card the races for the week, what our rail moves are, but also the timing of what we do to open the racetracks. When we're able to call up a meteorologist and say, at 2:30 in the morning, when do you expect this rainfall to come in? How much do you expect? What is the intensity? Now you can manage opening up the tracks. And again, that falls back to the communication with the trainers on letting them know what we're doing with the tracks. I'm fortunate at Belmont and Saratoga to have 2 different surfaces to work with. So in the future slides, you'll see we manage the courses differently because we have the ability to train specifically just on the training track and open up the main track, but to preserve it for racing. Also in this data collection, as you'll see here with the main track, the inner turf course, Widener turf course, this is specific for Belmont. So for our maintenance data, we have something set up for each of the 3 locations, all of the courses that are available that we use, as well as the moisture samples that are taken for both dirt and turf, as well as we put the ambulance, horse ambulance information on it as well. So that way, if a horse, God forbid, there is an incident on the track, we're able to capture the location, the name of the horse, the jockey, the attending event, get whatever specifics we can have. So again, you can see if there's a pattern, and it just gives us history, data to go back to in history. As Mick pointed out with the cushion measurements, we're now doing that at all 3 locations as well. We post this to the public as well as put it on our website for the patrons to see. This is a collection for Belmont Park. What we'll do is just take the 5 different samples, 5 different measurements at 16 points around the racetrack. This maintenance data, this is a particular day on July 3rd, as I had mentioned. This is the history that never would have been captured before. When you see opening the track, no equipment used, well, how can that be? We had 1.5 inches of rain leading up to that. So as you see, this is the main track. Cones were out, not a piece of equipment went on the track. The track foreman walked the track to make sure that there were no washouts, that it was ready for opening while they put the cones out at 3:30 in the morning. After the morning training that it was opened, you can see the track was back-raked. We'll get into that equipment as well on what we use. Back-raked, going the racing direction. We even capture what direction the equipment is going because depending on the piece of equipment that's used, it affects how the cushion is prepared. So you see at the morning break at 8:15, it's back-raked, going the right direction, go through training. We double float it. We'll go into that as well with the equipment that's used because we use 3 different types of floats at Belmont. So when a trainer says, well, the track was floated, and again, I know we're adding more equipment into this, but the types that we're using are all used for a specific purpose, as well as the outcome that we're looking for getting the track prepped for racing. You'll see that the double Harrows were used before the 4th race. So without even looking at the history of the rainfall or the weather, I can go through and say, without question, that there was rain expected. We prepped the race for back-raking it because there was a threat of a chance. The track was tight enough that we had to go the wrong way before the 2nd race to fill in the hoof prints. Back-raked it for the 3rd race, and then after that, the threat of rain was gone. The next races, the track was harrowed with a double Harrow. The last 3 races were turf races, so it was double-plated. After double plating it, you can see the end of the day it was rolled. We even have them list the rolling time. If we're preparing the track for a rain event, it can be rolled 3 times, it can be rolled 5 times. It all depends on the level of protection that we're looking for the track. We do similar information for the turf. As you'll see on this day, it's a turf day, a race day that we're on, and a schooling day for the inner turf course. We work out mainly on the inner turf course at Belmont. It'll list the number of schoolers that were out there, what the cones were set at for the horses to work, turf condition, and then further along is the rail is set at 9 for race number 9. You'll see we even list what we cut the height at and the mower that was used. We have 3 different mowers that we use on the track so we don't get wear patterns on the certain points on the turf surface. So we'll list the mower, the application that was applied after racing. The only thing that we haven't put on here is the operator that applied it, which we log because of our pesticide license. So as you'll see here, there's 2 fungicides that were applied, grub control, and then also an insecticide. This is the morning training that I had talked about earlier. You see our cones are out, the track looks fairly dry, coming through the rain event. At the break, we protect the inside of this track with the cones so that way, in case we do get any rainfall, the inside doesn't become waterlogged or saturated from the traffic that's out on there with normal morning training. We have taken steps, and this is, again, the communication with the trainers. If we were expecting or the possibility of a thunderstorm, there are times where we'll leave the inside of the track sealed with cones out, and we'll back rake from the cones out. Trainers, it's the communication. If they have to medicate, if they have to keep their horses on schedule to work, we try and accommodate them as best we can, and it's communication with them that pays off. This is the process right now of what we call back raking. It's a steel plates that we use on the track that there's 2 rows of back bars on it that just scratch the top inch or 1.5 inches of the surface to prepare it for drying out. You can see just with the skies, the threat of the storms are going through there, and we're prepping the track to get it ready for racing. And the horses will actually help us with this back raking process by training after it's done. Here's the process that you see. With the back raking, you can still see the slight imprint of the hoof prints on the top. That shows how much they were getting into the track and how tight that track was to show that it is ready for this stage of maintenance. When I talked about the plates, we've got 3 different types of plates, and that's why when we say we float the track or seal the track, each plate does something specific that we're looking for. This is what we call a light plate. That's the lightest plate that we use at NYRA. It's just a single steel, 3/4 inch plate. If the track were, when I say not sealed properly, we get caught with a thunderstorm and the track is harrowed. I can't go out there with certain pieces of equipment without moving too much cushion around. So what we do is we go over the track with 3 light plates, then behind that plate, we'll start putting heavier and heavier plates on it to pack the track down, to get the moisture to come up, to start progressing the process of either drying or sealing the track. Oops. This is what we call a single plate. Front rakes in the front, and then a single 3/4 inch plate, the 2 rakes behind. It gives you the option where you saw those little imprints when we were back raking before. You can lower the front bar to be able to scratch that out, as well as press the track down and then seal it with the 2 back bars. It's all hydraulically controlled from the operator station. The other thing that we aren't capturing on the data right now is the angle of the plate. That also impacts how the track seals. So that's one of the next steps that we'll go through, whether the plate was left flat, whether the plate was put on more of an angle, squeezing the track and pulling up that moisture to the top surface. This is something that we also use at NYRA. It's our double float. This is our heaviest float, and I'm sure some of you are aware of what the prices of steel and what this plate costs. Well, we've got the luxury on this plate where you see the bolt pattern on the lower right-hand corner. We've got the ability to turn those plates. So there's 2 3/4 inch plates, 1.5 inches of steel, pressing the cushion down, getting it as tight as we possibly can to scratch it and get that water off. So when you see us in that maintenance detail, it showed double plating the track. That's what we do to prep the track at the end of racing for the next day's training. Another piece of equipment that we use that we also document is the roller. This track packer we use at all 3 of our locations. It just helps prepare the cushion for significant rainfall. Harrows, as I mentioned, I harrowed the track this morning to open it up. Well, it's not quite that simple. This is our most aggressive harrow that we have at New York Racing. It's what we call an A-box harrow just because of the shape. There's a triangular pattern, staggered teeth, weights up front that actually cut the cushion. So after we've rolled the track at night for significant rainfall, we don't get the rain event that we're expecting. We go through and open the track up with this harrow. This harrow cuts the cushion up, and then we finish it with another harrow that I'll get to. We use this in the wintertime. This helps turn the cushion over to keep the cushion from balling up. But again, now we're capturing what equipment we used. Coming in the morning when you know you're grading the track, you know whether we're using 2 graders, whether we're using 1 grader, just by the type of harrows that we're using with the amount of material that's moved from harrowing all night. This is what we consider a double harrow. It's a 2-section, it's actually a 4-section harrow, 2 put together, 28 feet wide, steel pipe on the back to keep it level. And the significance of this photo is setting the harrow teeth. It's set on a concrete pad. They're installing new teeth where they're worn. We've purchased longer teeth now to get more wear out of the teeth. But again, if these things aren't set accurately and a tooth is too long or a tooth is too loose and drags to the bottom, now that's cutting into the base of your racetrack with all that weight going around there. So to underscore the significance of this, we have a concrete pad at each of the tracks or an asphalt pad at one location where we set our harrows and go through and adjust them as necessary. As Mick pointed out, water is key to everything. At NYRA, I've been fortunate to have a capital to work with to build new water trucks that we build internally. So we've updated our fleet at all 3 locations. And what's important about this truck right here is not only the 3 spray patterns in the back, but being 4,500 gallons. A 1.5 mile track, now I can go around that track and cover the whole track. I don't have to worry about overlap marks, start and stop positions. Another improvement that's been made is the GPS tracking, as Mick talked about. Now I can see how fast that water truck driver is going, how many gallons of water he's actually putting out. Is he flying around that track and putting out 2,000 gallons and coming back half full? So we're able to capture that information and, again, document how many gallons of water are put out at each race and throughout the whole day, rather than how we used to be it and say water as needed. You know, that's a thing of the past. With this pattern in the back, we've modified and we make our own nozzles now just to try and get the best pattern possible using stainless steel rather than copper that wears, but we're always trying to improve. We haven't found the perfect pattern on a fan spray. This truck is used specifically for the chutes at the track because a boom is more difficult to maneuver, and the outside of the track where either our ambulances go or where the horses warm up for the races. This is one of our older trucks, but a boom truck. This truck's 25 years old, and the new trucks were getting decaled, so I didn't get pictures of them in action. But the significance of this is that 38-foot boom, where we're able to water outside of the running lane of the horses, put down even spray patterns that will check the spray patterns, put collection buckets underneath the different nozzles to make sure that the water is coming out consistently. And as Mick pointed out, with that moisture sampling that was done at a different track location, if you see on the end of this nozzle, at the end of this boom, we've added 3 spray nozzles to get the water underneath the rail, because that's one of the things. When we're watering the racing surface and you can only go in so close with the boom, the inside of the track is drying. That water is being wicked out of the racing surface because you can't force that water underneath. So you'll see on this truck, we're actually watering what we call the gutter or the inside rail of the track. Again, this is a truck that is one of our smaller trucks, and that's why it's used on the training track. It's 3,800 gallons, handle a mile racetrack, but you had to go a little bit faster on the main track, which we've gotten away from with the bigger trucks. Moving on to other equipment that we use that we document with our maintenance information, a Tromel Screen. This is from one of our improvements at Belmont, widening the Widener turf course. We're actually screening the sod that was stripped off the course to keep the same consistency or growing medium out on the course. Spreader for the improvements or amendments that we put into the soils. This is a clay that we add to our tracks. Working with Mick and with Christy on this is to see what type of material gets us the correct response on what we're looking for. And the testing that's been done through the Racing Surface Testing Laboratory, we're able to have that historical data to see how the tracks change from year to year or how consistent they are and what amendments we need to put into these surfaces to make them optimal. The thing is, with all the racing surfaces that we have, each one has a different variation. What we strive to do is to have them be as close and consistent to one another as we can, but Belmont has a training track as a limestone base, clay base on the main track. You have to have that ability to add these amendments, whether it's a winter application where we're adding mason sand to soften the soil, to soften the cushion up a little bit so it doesn't ball up or you're able to maintain it through the winter, or in the summertime when we're adding silt and clay. Every time it rains, every time it snows, every time that the wind blows at 40 miles an hour when it's 20 degrees, you're losing components of that racetrack. It's never the same racetrack. And that's why the testing is so critical. To be able to go back at that testing and say, I need to add 400 tons of clay to this track to get it to where we were last year. Or I need to put 2,000 tons of mason sand to get this to where I can maintain it through the wintertime without using a ton of salt and burning steel and diesel fuel. Those are the types of things where the testing has been so beneficial to NYRA. Another thing that we use is just, again, to document the grading. If a track dries out more quickly on a specific day, what he's doing is the track has been sealed. They're just grabbing that inside collar for where the edge of the float leaves or the edge of a harrow. Because every time you go around the track with a harrow, that end pin is pushing material to the inside. The way every racetrack is designed, that material flows to the inside. If you don't do this, the material builds up. So again, it's just something that we document what we're doing. So whether it's the main track, the training track, or the pony track, anytime a piece of equipment goes out on those surfaces, we're able to document what it's doing. We also put GPS on the graders to see the speed that they go around and how far they go out, because he's only going to make one lap around that track, grabbing that inside collar. But you know what? If it was a winter day and there was a bigger windrow in there, I'll see he had to go out 3 passes and he did the job correctly. It benefits me in doing my job when I can't be at 3 different locations. Again, this is just the Belmont training track being tested, where Dr. Mahaffey was down to go over, as well as the ground penetrating radar that Mick went through. Another thing that Mick discussed was the TDR Moisture Probe. We've expanded the turf courses, as I mentioned, both courses at Belmont. We raised the irrigation heads. Now here's the balance of something that we have. How do we control irrigating 4 acres of new sod while still racing on the track? This is how we do it. We have wells around the outer edge of the inner track that we're able to hook up these portable water cannons. We can control the irrigation, the pattern that we irrigate. And one of the things that we also do is no matter when we water, somebody is by the heads. We don't just turn the irrigation on and say that we put out 2,000 gallons, a quarter of an inch of water for 20 minutes. Somebody is physically there watching to make sure that the irrigation pattern is as good as it possibly can be, depending on what the wind is. An irrigation or a head doesn't get stuck over watering a spot that nobody might see at 10 o'clock at night when we're watering. And the other thing that the probe has done for NYRA is to be able to determine the conditions of the turf course. It's not the feel of going out with the probe like they've done it for 30 years and picking up the growing medium and saying, well, I think it's good and it feels underneath me. Now we're able to correlate those numbers to either a firm or a good or a yielding or a soft turf course. The spray patterns at Belmont are tricky because of the hedges that we have. The wide turf courses, and the reason we had the ability to widen the turf courses is because when it was set up, steeplechasing was used on the courses, and they had wider straightaways and tighter turns. We need the opposite now. With this spray pattern that we have, you'll see where the portable rail is set up. Again, going back to collecting the data and being able to see what the moisture content is, how the grass is reacting to the irrigation, and also monitoring. We've got 3 different racetracks, 3 different types of irrigation pumps, 3 different types of systems. It makes it challenging. As I just mentioned, the widening of the Belmont turf course, we did the inner turf course. This is just to show what steps we took and the equipment that we were able to purchase to be able to do this internally. We raised the turf course roughly 2.5 feet, gaining 26 feet. That gives me the ability to move that rail 2 extra times through the meets. So being able to go into the jocks room and say, we're gonna run, we just got 3/4 of an inch of rain, knowing that the rail is going out tomorrow and I've got a spot to put the rail, it gives us a big advantage. This is just the finish of the drainage layer, as well as you see the topsoil rolled over to go over it. That's the height, again, where you can see the outside rail. We purchased new door lock rail to raise the outside rail here after the job was completed. We did the same thing up at Saratoga. Again, we're up there for 7 weeks, 40 race days. The turf course is where you see that inner cut on that turf course. That's where the crown of the racetrack was. So anything from where that grass is was unusable ground up until 2 years ago. So again, with what that means, not only financially, but also for the safety of the horses and riders, we're able to rotate off of the melon turf course 2 extra times during the week, and it gives us that flexibility. Again, with the equipment that's used up at Saratoga, because of the orientation of the track, there's no easy gaps to get up to with this equipment. The point of this was to just show what steps we had to take to try and make this surface, without bringing heavy equipment out there after the finished product was done. For the rental of a lull, we're able to put 7 tractor trailer loads of sod over the outside rail and install this with a tracked sod laying machine. As I said, you can see on the outside rail, the rubbers that we use to pad the outside rail, we raised the turf rail about 14 inches, the turf course about 14 inches on the clubhouse turn. This is a photo of the irrigation at Saratoga. We're in the process right now of putting automated irrigation in, but we're still using agricultural pipes up at Saratoga. So to say that that's challenging to irrigate is an understatement. But with having that TDR probe and being able to go out, put pans out, and watch how much irrigation we're putting out and have the flexibility of moving the rail again, it's a big improvement. This is one of the things that I just pointed out with Christy and Mick's letter with our last testing of Belmont. And what the point of this is to show the consistency of what we're trying to do, and to have that data to go back and look at our racing surfaces, what direction they're going, and to look at 1 year, 2 years, what improvements we've made and how the surface is reacting. We're not going to change the consistency of Belmont or Oklahoma overnight, but we're looking at what improvements we can make. And with having that data and having either the sieve analysis or the mechanical hoof tester or the ground penetrating radar that will identify problem areas at Aqueduct on the outside of the main track where the Harrows turn, we see that there's a spot that needs to be addressed. Because of having this testing done, we're able to identify that. Sure, it shows in the wintertime after a rain event that you can see water in that area, 2 feet off the outside rail. Again, the information now from this equipment just clarifies what we're seeing. It's all data that we can point back to. The last thing that I'd like to go over is the types of equipment that, or not types of equipment, but the information that Mick has used with the X-ray diffraction. Going through at Belmont, walking into, as I say, 20 to 25 years of historical data. Why is it big sandy? Why is the track reacting a certain way when you can see how much silt and how much clay? We have our own soil testing companies that we use besides the Race's surface testing lab. We also do it internally. But the one thing that we were missing is we were looking at broken down sand, or sand that has actually smaller in particle size, and that on a hydrometer test is showing as silt and clay. Using this system and going through with sending soil out to be tested, we're able to identify what the true particles are in our cushion and now amend those. So that picture of the spreader that you saw putting out the clay on the Belmont training track, we're able to identify the deficiencies that we have in the cushion. And to be able to have that information is invaluable to me. Going through and having this information, whether it's our maintenance that we can put out to other racetracks, even if you can't put this stuff on the website or go through what we're currently doing at NYRA, the racetracks have to start somewhere. The paper log was good. We sent over 1,200 pages of maintenance to the task force report when they were looking at the issues at Aqueduct. And now I can just give them a disc. It makes my job so much easier. Significant progress has been made. There's still a ton to do. And the hard thing to do is to have that with my staff in 3 different locations, to have the people buy into making a difference, because I can't see everything that goes on. This certainly helps me look at the maintenance and what's taking place at each place, but we've changed the philosophy at NYRA. We've gotten people more involved with what we're doing and to make that difference, and hopefully it shows. Thank you for your time.